So, we have a couple of final questions now. When it comes to the development, the further development, Mr. Tidau talked about it already. So we've seen a bit of the potential further development. So where is the biggest need when it comes to the further development of digital education programs for people with disabilities? Where do you see the biggest need, the biggest demand? Who wants to take the floor? I can say something on this. My name is Uwe Hildner. I believe that there are needs and demands at two levels. Those who make the decisions. Previously, it was mentioned quite rightfully that we do not have sufficient people with disabilities attending here. And yes, that's true. And I think that's a point of criticism that we need to accept. They have to decide first and foremost. And Mr. Tidau said we would not go to one direction, say we only do vocational training, say, or no, when it's about promoting the independence of people with disability, well, then it's up to them which topic is important to them, which does not exclude us from also intensively looking at vocational training. But for me, as the chairperson of the cooperative, it's clear that the people with disabilities decide, and it's not us deciding that. And the second thing, I said decision maker, and the second decision maker are the responsible people in the institutions themselves. Of course, as the cooperative, we have a couple of financial funds that we provided to start developing the whole thing, and you can imagine it costs quite a lot of money. Now these funds are spent, which is okay. That's what they were meant to be for. So now it needs to start with independent financing, and it's an important task that it's going to be free of charge for people with disabilities. And yes, that it is, but still we need to generate some funding, some income, and that we can get through the licenses that we sell to the institutions. So classically, we actually do a lot of marketing. We sell that, and even if our original concept to present us on the trade fair for sheltered workshops in 2020 failed because that simply didn't happen. But we approach the institutions and all of those who know about DIDAB and believe that it's meaningful actually in the institutions advertise it. So unless they are not the decision makers themselves, the decision makers then find out, yes, we need to be involved. And you can have a test license to show it and look at it in the institutions with Lebenshilfe Peine Burgdorf that I belong to. What happens is that we have it in the vocational area, vocational training area, we offer it in the daycare centers, and we offer it also in the homes of the people. It's very popular, and even in the homes it starts to become apparent. So at Lebenshilfe Peine Burgdorf, I see it has been accepted by everyone. Of course, it needs some work. And one tip to everyone, the Aktion Mensch campaign sponsors Internet for everyone. Through that, we were able to finance a lot of technology. Because what you have to say, it's not just that the license costs money, it's the technology with which you can operate it also costs money. Right, so much on your initial question. Thank you. Someone else? Yes. And the question was, where is there further development and need for further development? And I think it somewhat has addressed already. We have heard about manna from the heavens. Well, digital education doesn't work completely independently and on its own. We talked about media competencies, initial access to user devices. We know there is a large group in the institutions that use tablets and mobile phones, but we still have a share of people with disabilities who simply have not been in touch with devices at all. So there is a training need to address it, which we see at GDW North, that we don't just train people on how to use DIDAB, but that more and more so there are general requests on using how to use tablet computers or, general competencies in digitalization, how to safely handle the internet, etc. That's being requested. We see that as GDW Nord, we can't cater for all of it, but we see there is some demand to work on that, apart from all the wishes that can be implemented in a digital form that basically unlimited. Mr. Ring said it before. Basically, you can actually create content and e-learning content on anything, basically. So there is lots of demand that we try to work through by and by. It's probably never ending. I found it quite interesting that the African partners have opened the perspective that there are similar offers for training and further training for young people, for children, for kids.
To our African partner. Is there also a need for development for social media?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think it is important that you look at inclusivity instead of standalone programs for persons with disabilities. That's why we refer to it as digital education for people with special needs. Because remember where we come from a society where disabled people are separated from the normal, so-called normal people. I mean, I'm just from Red Cross, and I was very impressed with their inclusive programs. So instead of every person have access to some form of social media. So instead of channeling it in one direction, it's better to have an open platform so that everyone can access it. But you can also have persons with disabilities sharing their experiences with non-disabled people. We have a program where we call disability sensitization, because if you use wrong terminology and language, then you close persons with disabilities outside. But if you open it in an open platform, it allows for everyone to integrate and be able to deal with issues openly. Thanks.
Ja, Thema soziale Medien möchte.
Right, social media. Anyone else who would like to add something? Is there any need? Anything you'd like to mention? Okay, so now let's continue. What kind of development is necessary for institutions that aid people with disabilities in order to allow for better participation? I think you said something on this. Are there any further needs? What do you need? What do the institutions, what do the workshops need? Let me take a look at the workshop people. Well, what is important most of all is that the people working in the sheltered workshops have a possibility to have access to the internet. Not all of the sheltered workshops have Wi-Fi for their employees, and technology very often is not available either, so it's really difficult. There's such a great program, but no one can work with it because A, the technology is missing, the hardware, and B, access, Wi-Fi is not available because many people in the sheltered workshops themselves, they do not have their own Wi-Fi, their own access. They only have a very limited volume on their mobile phones because they have limited financial means. And, thus what should be done is in how far access for people would be made available. In our instance, in most of the sheltered workshops, we do have Wi-Fi nowadays, but, technology doesn't always work well. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That's an important aspect we just learned, and you addressed it. Digitalization through Corona has, gone through a hype. So we have a new type of rift here, really. Access to the internet, access to digital programs or not. So what does it need on the part of the organization? And staff-wise, let me take a look to Mr. Hildner. So are the people sufficiently trained? Yes and no is the answer. I would not give you a generalized answer, say yes or no. You know, the truth is somewhere in between. The one thing is, as it has been stated already, technology-wise, we can install whatever we want to. If the public network doesn't allow it it can't be faster. Example is our Burgdorf sheltered workshop is still on a copper line, and the copper line has its limits capacity-wise. So even behind the sheltered workshops and institutions, there is some truth. That's the one thing. And the other thing is, with our staff, it's, you know, happening just like with the general public. There are people who said don't want anything to do with it. It's not my thing. And there are others who say, well, when will you continue? When can we do something? So that's the order of magnitude we're talking about. Of course, we're trying to bring our people close to it. And, you know, I saw it as an observer that with us, we did an inclusive training by Mr. Tito. By the way, he is actually educationalist for special needs, and he knows how to approach people with disabilities. So it was mixed. There were people with disabilities and professionals involved, and everyone afterwards said, oh, it's so simple. Now we know what to do. So the idea was, oh, it's ever so difficult. You have to open up a word menu, thousands of possibilities that you need to open. You want to enter one thing, you've done it half a year ago, but you don't know where this menu item was, and Google doesn't tell you anything. That was the idea of the obstacles. But I mean, that's exactly what we have tried with DDAP to avoid. No big obstacles, easy entry, and it doesn't matter who's the operator. Is it whether it's a young person with or without disabilities, a professional or whoever. So I believe that we as sheltered workshops, it's not true what I'm saying. It's I should open it up and say we, the institutions for aiding people with disabilities, we are just like the normal population. We need to look at what's happening. My experience is many people say, oh, it's that simple once they see it, and some people say it's easier than what we did before. So it's actually easier in everyday life, and it doesn't mean that personal communication will be left out. It is necessary, still necessary, but it's an instrument, it's an additional tool in order to move things forward. And most of all, and that's what I think is important, and that's what's stipulated in the cooperative, the autonomy, the independence of people with disabilities put in the foreground. The difficulty to obtain education by going somewhere where you find complicated situations, use public transport, you need to be accompanied by a caregiver or something. You don't need to do that by bringing education to people. That's the important thing. And just like with all of the development, you simply need time, and then time will tell, and it will be normality. The starting has already happened. The start has been happening. So we have a new normal here. A long time we thought with Corona, or we'll reduce everything, but now we have something new, and the new thing is the big challenge, really, as Mr. Grump has told us. You were someone who said we also need social competences being together, which we now have to relearn somewhat. Well, generally speaking, we need a competence for people to design things. Processes, structures need to be designed, material, and people need support. It's not the one, it's the competence for all of it. And that is the task of everyone, of the management, of politicians, to set the parameters so that the environment is shaped in such a way that everyone can live up to the rights as in the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. By the way, this also includes a right for vocational training. So that competence is universal in nature. And what I said this morning, that was rather an excerpt and not the whole lot of it.
Mr. Patuga. What is the development we need to get good digital or also personal development to switch together in hybrid?
Yeah, I hope I heard your question correctly. You see, I think we need an international movement of demand. We need to start demanding that, because there is no universal accessibility our governments should participate in making sure that as part of their social security net, they provide accessibility to persons with disability. Because with your gadgets, you'll be able to walk into a shop and translate what you want, show a person what you want to buy if you can't see, if you can't hear. So perhaps the program in terms of development should be how do we bring our authorities closer to make sure that it becomes part of the social net, that it's added as part of the learning program. And as institutions develop material, it must be more inclusive. It mustn't be for them, it must be for everyone. Like the content the prof is talking about, when you start developing content at the beginning, your theory must talk to what exactly you want to achieve. And it shouldn't be the last thing. You know, we think about other people, then after that, people with disabilities. So we must think about everyone in every program that we are doing. And institutions of higher learning should also develop content and material that brings people closer, so that as people leave universities, they also participate in an inclusive society by making sure that they understand disability. It might be an added part of curriculum in institutions of higher learning, so that society can live inclusively, not in a separate way. I mean, you come from the Berlin Wall, you now have a disability wall, where disabled people are living differently. We have the same problem in Africa, where disabled people must go to homes, they must go to centers, they must go to special schools. We need to start having universal programs so that people don't see a difference. I'm sure a child of a parent with disability doesn't see disability to a parent. He sees a parent or she sees a parent. But once he gets out of the house, then he or she gets told that your parent is different. But inside the house, the parent was not different. So we need to start developing material from the beginning that says we are all the same. We are just diverse in nature.
Yeah. Yes, we are all the same. Das ist ein Satz, den ich nur unterstreichen kann.
Right, that's a sentence that I can only underline. In social work, we also have human rights that are close to our heart, and digital participation has something to do with that. We maybe have a new digital divide now. People who have access to digitalization and have certain abilities, and those who don't have them, be it in the rural area, we are expanding the grid here now, but also for people with disabilities. So the question is, what kind of experience have you made to move this topic into society? Which discussions are you seeing when you say people with disabilities also need to participate in the digital format? What kind of discussion are you seeing, and how do you bring this to society? I am not so certain as to whether the discussion, which I deem to be absolutely necessary, digital divide, is an issue which has been known for a longer period of time, and the corona pandemic has shown this. If you think about schools, it has shown it to a massive extent just how far behind people are. And this is across the whole of society that we can see it. Now, I'm asking myself whether the discussion that would be necessary to change long-term parameters, as to whether that discussion is vociferous enough and loud enough. And in particular for the people with disabilities, it's always a specific challenge to bring this discussion to the public eye, and I think there's lots of space to act on this and improve matters. I'd rather turn this around and say digital divide, as you call it. I would rather see this as a kind of positive event. In the context of my responsibility for the project, it has become clear to me that in Germany or worldwide, same is probably true in South Africa, there are completely other groups of people who are left out of education. People who do not have enough language language abilities. Let's take people who come from Ukraine or Syria or wherever and join us here in Germany. Or take people who for some reason weren't able to learn how to write. And, you know, it goes on. I remember when we started in our institution to work with plain language, it was about the issue of, you know, changes when it came to insurance, change of care insurance. Relatives said, stop, now finally I understood it since you're using plain language. I heard it in the news, but I have not understood it when the news presented it. So what I want to say with it, that with this initiative, we actually reach out to many other groups, and such a discussion about a digital divide makes it all the more clear just how necessary the all-area coverage of social media is. And, you know, what I think about is a car can support you wonderfully in your locomotion, but a car can also be a murder instrument if it hits a group of people. So it all depends on how you use it, what you do it. If you deliberately want to exclude groups of people, then that would be a rather obnoxious thing of interpreting digital means. But our task, our assignment is a different one. And in many areas, this can be expanded on and duplicated to integrate other areas as well. Now, as a final question, partly you have already addressed this. What does it require on the part of politics, administration, that digital participation is allowed in a better way, and not just for people with disabilities, but other vulnerable groups? Mr. Patuga mentioned that you said something on this, where you might be able to receive funds. You also mentioned the limits of these activities. So what would be your wishes? Where would you say, well, if participation, if you want to go the first step, you need to go the second. What kind of equipment do you need, and what do politics and administration have to provide you with? In the state of Schleswig-Holstein, there is a day of being loud and making noise, and I wish that at least once a month such a day of being loud would be in the Republic, where we make ever so clear we're all part of society, and we have the responsibility that society is shaped in such a way that everyone has his or her rights. So let's go to the road or create a shitstorm or something like that. We won't be able to do it any other way. Otherwise, we file lawsuits and then we wait for 10 years till the federal German court has decided our way. Right, that's grassroots lobbying at its best. You activate the general public and move politicians forward. Do you have active contacts with politicians? Yes, of course. Well, tell us more about it. Well, the Federal Minister for Labour, Hubertus Heil, is the MEP for Peine-Gifhorn for the district, and of course I was able to use this contact. Unfortunately, he was unable to come here, but he sent his Under-Secretary of State, and Mr. Schmachtenberg is an expert in his area, no doubt about it. So through that, it is possible to move these messages into the political sphere, not just that politicians supported us, but see what's happening in order to come up with measures on the political level. Any further ideas how politicians' administration could be activated? Well, in a subsequent project, we will try to develop concepts, strategy concepts, in order to move things forward. That would be the role of the university and science to accompany this. So my very last question is an open-end one. Anything that you would like to mention at the very end, anything that's close to your heart? What's the message that you want to leave with us? And maybe also the message to the audience. Why not? Give us your message. Do you have a message, or maybe do you have a question? Does the audience have a question to our panel?
So, Mr. Patuga, what is your message? What is your message you will give us?
No, you see, the audience was supposed to give us a message, but it's fine. No, look, I think we must pat ourselves at the back. We're not doing bad. from the forum that we are sitting in. So the work that has gone in, I think, has unleashed some general understanding of people in terms of where we're going. So like the Prof says, I think you need exposure, you need media coverage. We have many forums in South Africa. For an example, I'm not sure whether you celebrate International Day for Persons with Disability. On the 3rd of December, there's an International Day for Persons with Disability. Maybe at some point, you don't even have to say anything. As you were saying, you must speak louder. It's just to play the digital videos without saying anything to the public and get some feedback to see what people think. But we're not on the wrong track. It's gonna need of us to dialogue, but get politicians involved and more politicians involved. We have a relationship with our politicians, but sometimes they think it's another subject. It doesn't belong to them. But with the 2 universities involved, I think we can expand to other states and to other provinces and make sure that we open up to all people. And lastly, thank you very much for inviting me here. At least I ran away from the winter. I got some knowledge. And I hope that if the government is listening, that this program will continue, but we must look at if we can't integrate it into the Lower Saxony Eastern Cape Agreement so that it's a standing program for politicians to also report on. Thank you. Danke.
Ja, danke Ihnen. So, wir sollen laut sein.
Right, thank you. We're supposed to be loud. Let's be loud. Let's stand up for us, do good things and talk about it and activate politicians. That's a good program. That's a good plan. I'd like to say thank you for the great presentations and thank you for the discussion. Thank you for being interested. And I hand over to my colleague now. Thank you for being our host here for this round, Andrea. Thank you, Ms. Philipp, and thank you to all of the people with disabilities who contributed. Thank you for your work. Thank you to the professionals who supported us, and a word of thanks to Karin Frankenstein, Benjamin Rink, Dörte Engelkes, Julia Hartung-Zielke for their work in this project. You have to see that this project was planned in a completely different context, and then came Corona. And without needing an extension, this project was carried out right in time, and I think it was concluded rather successfully, and that's not self-evident. So thank you so much to all the parties involved that have participated in this research project. Thank you so much to the institutions involved. And I'd like to mention Uwe Hildner as Managing Director of Lebenshilfe Peine Burgdorf here, Bastian Tiedau for GDW Nord as a cooperation partner. Thank you to you, and also thank you so much to the institutions that allowed us to do it. The Federal Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs, Federal Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs financed this project, and the university provided the rooms here. So Mr. Bicker is not here now, but thank you so much to the university for giving us the rooms and the research lab that we founded a couple of years ago. I think that's something which needs to be mentioned, just how our university comes in here in the field of the third mission, goes to the outside, research, teaching and changes. All of this goes hand in hand, which is something which I like particularly well. Thank you to the speakers of today, to Professor Grumpf for his impressive presentation this morning. Thank you to the other speakers who we heard. Thank you to Mr. Patuka, to Professor Zoy, although we had some technical issues, but generally speaking, I think it was a very good conference. And thank you also to the agency, Blume and Pilardi, that provided the work. And thank you to our translators in the little box in the back of the room. They tried to get some air inside their little box, and I believe That's quite an elaborate work. So thank you very much to our interpreters, and thank you so much to everyone who listened to us over the internet.